Does your life suck? Do you have challenges in life? Do you sometimes wish life was just easier? Well, you're in luck because today's episode we are talking about stoicism for mental toughness and overcoming life's challenges. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm
One of those
Randy.
titles.
That's Danny. So, Danny, do you ever wish life was
What's
a
up,
little
Randy?
bit easier?
Yeah, it's funny. Yes, I think we all do all the time, and like I think a lot of us. It's funny. I was just talking literally this morning to my class about this. Like we all have like this idea of like happiness, and it's like really just like never having problems again. It's like everything's comfortable, everything's good, and it's like it's really unrealistic, and it's also like in a way it's also counterproductive because like anything good in life or anything really valuable usually takes effort and is usually hard for a while, and then like it usually involves struggle and challenges. I mean, that's just how it is. Like,
Yeah, not to mention that like part of happiness is working towards a goal, which involves
yeah,
problems and struggle and all these things. Yeah, it's crazy how we have this concept that like happily ever after. I think it's Disney's fault,
yeah.
clearly. That like
Yes, it's totally their fault. No, that
clearly
is true though, right? That's another good one where it's like, yeah, like you meet this person and everything's good forever.
happily
Like
ever
the
after.
end.
I know that's what they all think. They put on the glass slipper and then happily ever after. But like that's when the problems begin. Like the solution to one problem is just the beginning of another problem. And it's like I was this book that I read, Loving What Is, like it wasn't until I read that I understood that like almost all the mental struggle that we have and suffering and everything just comes down to arguing with reality, like arguing with what is.
Yeah.
And it's an
Yeah.
argument you're never gonna win ever.
Well, I think you're right though. I think it's like it's having misconceptions about reality or having like, you know, representing reality in a fictitious or false way, and then just like not accepting the fact of reality, right? And it's funny too, because I think like more often than not, like when I accept reality and I face the challenges and I'm doing something I want to do, I feel better about myself and I feel like my life has more value than it ever did when I'm not doing those things. And I think, but like before you start, like your brain just does all these like weird tricks and like you imagine all these things and like it's just funny how we think that like I think that's why a lot of people think like money will solve all their problems because they imagine like most of their problems are probably tied to money and they imagine if they had money all this would go away and therefore no problems. But it's like, well, then what are you going to do though? Because you're still going to do stuff. You're still alive, hopefully, right? You'll do things, so
Not to
you're going to have more
mention you have
problems.
the fear of losing money, which you don't have right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
that's another
that's a
problem.
that's a big one. Yeah. And yeah, it's like I love in meditations how Marcus Aurelius says everything that you want by some circuitous route, you could have it right now if you just let go of the past, have faith in the future, love what is, and act right. And it's just like it's the craziest thing because all of this struggle and suffering, we're trying to change the past or we're trying to make the future work, even though it's not here today. There's very little influence we have
Yeah.
over it. So if we just let go of those things and trust that they'll work out and then just love what you have right now, it's like the feeling that you get from that is incredible.
No, it is. I think the other thing that goes with that too is like, the Stoic idea that like of recognizing what's in your control and recognizing the power you have to act and to like control how you think and your response to things. I think that idea I've been thinking about that a lot recently because like been working hard on a lot of different things and like it is really amazing how we can actually just decide how we're going to feel about something and respond to it if we think about it for more than like a minute and don't just like let our emotions go. Because I think I was telling you before we started, like this weekend I was working on something different and new and it was really challenging and I was trying to do it as fast as I could and like the one night I had worked on it for like 12 hours that day. I was definitely tired, definitely a little burnout, and like things weren't making any sense anymore. But like, I was like, oh, I maybe I can't do this and all. But I was like, you know what? I was like, let me just go to sleep. I'll look at it again in the morning. And then I woke up in the morning. I solved that one problem I was working on, and then it like re-energized. But I realized like it was at that moment that I was like, I'm tired. I'm probably overdid it today. So I'm probably spent, and any more of this is not going to go well. It's like I think just like realizing like we forget, like we think the world dictates how we feel rather than like we dictate how we feel. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And it's during those times when you're tired or you're hungry or you're in pain when like
Yes.
when life seems terrible and you just need somebody to come, like it would be nice if there was another one of you just waiting for those moments. So it could be like, hey, you're just tired. Like, get some
Yeah.
sleep. But it's like during those times, you're like, my life is terrible. How is this ever going to work out? I'm never going to make. And it's just like you go on this whole rant about how terrible life is when really you just need to go to sleep.
It is funny too, because it changes so fast though. It's like we are like I was wondering, I don't know why I was thinking that today, but I was thinking like I was wondering like I feel like sometimes it's like all these mechanisms we had for survival that worked a long time ago, like are just mess us up now really bad. Because
Mm-hmm.
like, like being afraid of things and like imagine like our imaginations and stuff. Because like there was a lot of stuff that could kill us, back in the day. But now it's like not so much. And so instead we like channel that energy into like making every little thing hard that doesn't need to be hard. Or like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, we sign up for things and then we expect them to be a piece of cake. Go to school and you expect it to be super easy. Like, it's just like funny. Like that one thing, like it's another, what was that saying? It
It's
was
a cold,
another,
dark night on this side of
yeah,
Everest. Dude, so
yeah,
true.
yeah.
So true.
It is, right?
Yeah.
It's like you sign up for this stuff, you don't expect it. If it was easy, it wouldn't be valuable, and you wouldn't really be learning anything or like bettering yourself too. Because I think that's the other thing. Like so many, I mean, the Stoics say, I mean, so many philosophers, the existentialists, that like we really grow the most when we face these challenges in life and overcome them because we show ourselves that we can do it, and we also definitely learn things in those moments that are important and valuable. But
Hmm.
like if we don't have any of those moments, we just stay the same person throughout, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like we do these things because we want some result. So like at the moment in the present, we're uncomfortable, we're dissatisfied, whatever it is, that urges us to want to do something different because we think that when we do that, we'll get some result. We have this goal. When we get that goal, we'll have some result, we'll feel good. And it's like what Marcus Aurelius was saying. Okay, so fine, go after that. Have faith in the future, trust that it'll happen, but also just right now, just focus on being happy. Because if
Yeah.
if like the normal thing with goals is you set your happiness contingent on you achieving that. So like you're dissatisfied right now. You're like, if I lose 10 pounds, then I'll be happy. Okay, so automatically you're
Yeah.
dissatisfied now because you're like, well, I still have this 10 pounds. I'm not happy now. Then you get that. And once you get the goal, you have no direction after that. So then you're dissatisfied again. Whereas if you're just like, okay, fine, I'm going to work towards that, but also I'm just going to have faith in the future that that'll work out. I'm going to let go of the past, stop criticizing myself for getting myself to this spot, and then I'm just going to focus on what I have. Okay, cool. I have a sweet gym membership. Like, that's pretty awesome. And you know what?
Yeah.
I got this awesome scale that I can use to weigh myself. Fantastic. And so, like, all these things, if we just focus
Yeah.
on what we love in the present, what's good in the present, it basically solves all of our problems that we're trying to go this whole like massive circuitous route to get to.
No, it is true though. I think like, recognizing, I don't know, I've been telling myself a lot recently. Like, I'm very thankful that I'm in a position where I have the opportunity to like learn new things so I can do what I want to do and change into the career that I want. Like that's awesome. Like that I have, the ability to learn these things on my own and all these, there's so many things you can be happy about now. And I think that is the trick, right? It's finding happiness in the journey, not the destination. Because the destination you don't know. You don't know if you'll reach it. You don't know if it'll change. You don't know anything about that. And like you said too, I think, we make this mistake of tying happiness to conditional outside factors that don't really have anything to do with our happiness at the end of the day. And it's like, it is. It's one of the trickiest things though, is like learning how to just be happy within the moment and just also like see what's good about like, you know, the things that I guess, well, finding that direction and wanting to actually go after these things, because like you said, if you have a goal, you have to do it. And sometimes that means committing like 100% in order to
Mm-hmm.
get there. So you better really want it because otherwise, all the things you're giving up when you make that choice, you're going to be upset about losing. And it's like, that
Yeah.
balance is
So
hard.
so like having your happiness contingent on some goal is just such a flawed strategy because that
Yeah.
goal 99.99999% of the time is not achievable right now. So like
No.
that almost guarantees your happiness is not available right now. Whereas like so it's great to have goals. Like if you don't have goals, and especially if you don't write them down, you're not going to achieve them. So like having goals is very, very important. And working towards them is a very important part of your happiness. But having your happiness dependent upon that is a flawed strategy. So like if you have a goal, ask yourself, can I achieve that goal today? Most of the time the answer is going to be no. Okay.
Yeah.
But then you can ask yourself, well, what can I achieve today? And that could be your goal, because then you're working on something that's achievable today. You can live one day at a time, and you can all of a sudden be happy with today, which is really all that we can ever do.
Yeah, you know what I think helps a lot with that too is instead of I've been trying this recently and I've been having some mild success. So this is literally like anecdotal, I guess. But I, instead of phrasing it as goals, you know, I'm gonna have this thing in 6 months or whatever. Instead, I've been trying to just find the course that I want to be on and make my goal to be on that course. Do you know what I mean? So like trying to like I'll just use the example because we're learning programming, like trying to learn programming. Like I really wanted to do it. And so that's my course that I'm on. I'm happy I'm doing it. The end, I'm not positing an end result as long as I continue at it and keep doing it. Does that make sense? And I think
Dude,
it seems to work better because there's no final, like, there's no imaginary thing like I'm getting a certificate where it's the end, you know, and I've crossed the finish line or something. Like, I know it'll go on and I hope it goes on a long time because I really enjoy it. So it's like, it makes it easier, I think, to just, you know, deal with the everyday problems that you run into, you know,
but
learning new things and stuff.
that's a great point, because then those difficult days that you have where you're all upset because you didn't reach this level of mastery already, you're like, but wait, am I on course? Yeah. Okay. Pat myself on the back.
Yeah,
Cool.
that's
Go
it,
go to
right?
sleep. I'm tired. Yeah.
Well, not to mention too, though, it's like, you know, I think because I also struggle with it, I'm sure, you know, you probably do too. Like whenever I find something like a goal that I want, especially when it's like involves learning things, in the process of learning those things, I usually modify the goal anyway, because now I know more about the thing. So now I know more about what like I am attracted to about it or whatever, you know, what interests me and stuff. And so, you know, my goals are always plastic and flexible anyway. So why not just keep on course, you know, stay on a course that's true to you, and then you're good. You don't have to worry about the other stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, it's actually like a really important thing of figuring out the life that you want to live. Because like most people are just like, I want to be a billionaire. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
great, magic. You're a billionaire. What are you going to do with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? Okay. You're going to be like most billionaires and just be miserable and try and be an even bigger billionaire so you can out billionaire every other billionaire. Is that what you're going to do? Or, or like, it kind of comes down to like, what would you do if your life, if anything was possible, and if you had all the time in the world, what would you do? And then just focus on doing that. Because like the money's an illusion. And all these other things, like the fame, all this stuff is an illusion that keeps you from actually figuring out what you want to do with your life and then doing that. It's like what you're saying with having the course. Like, what course do you want to be on? Because no matter what, you're gonna have to do it 24/7. And like
Yeah.
you hear about these famous people, like these singers, these musicians, and everyone who like that was their dream since they were a childhood, to be a rock star musician, to go on tour, and then they get to the reality of going on tour, performing every day, having to have that high level of energy, and they're miserable. And it's just like it really is important to figure out what it is that you want to be doing with the rest of your life and just do it.
Yeah, it's funny though, because they get on tour too. They play the same set of songs every day. You know, it's like, oh yeah, it's a grind. Most things are a grind. You know, it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's part of life. So you have to find what you really does interest you. Yeah, it is funny too about like knowing what you want in life. I tell you, one thing that like I will say philosophy, really studying it really helped me with is like realizing how many of our values aren't even our own and that we just tacitly accept from the world around us without question. And like once I realized that, and like because so many philosophers point out that, you know, like what's really valuable, you know, they ask that question, and like most of the stuff society tells us is really valuable is not valuable, right? Like buying things, you know, getting A's, all these things, like they're not, it's not really that important. Like what's really important, you know, it's a difficult question. But I think once you start to look at it that way, you can start to really kind of question yourself too and ask yourself, like, how many things do I do are really a consequence of like social pressure, norms, all this stuff, and how much of that is really me? And if you can start to weed that stuff out, oh my God, it's so much easier to like figure out where you should be going and get yourself in the right direction.
Absolutely. Like there, I just listened to this book on the philosophy of Alfred Adler, and he was talking about freedom, how like people think that like freedom, all these different ideas, but really he talks about freedom being uh willing to be disliked by other people. Like that's true freedom. Because all of us, especially when we want celebrity or we want fame or we want money or any of these things, it's because we want to be liked by other people and we're trying to please the most people possible. And he's like,
Yeah.
actually, it's very, very selfish when you're trying to please other people because you're always you think okay, so it's like it's a crazy mental construct because you think because you want other people to be happy that you're thinking about them, but you're actually just thinking about yourself because you want them to be
Yeah.
happy so that they like you. And it's like the most selfish thing you could do.
Yeah.
Whereas if instead you were just really selfish and you just concerned yourself with yourself, then other people are going to figure stuff out anyways.
That's a good point too. And it is funny, I hear so many people say like I want to be an influencer, I want to do this and that. And it's like, and I think a lot of times like they either see it as like, it looks cool or it looks easy or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that might be the case, but if you don't really like it, like they don't see the work behind it. Like most people don't see the effort that's involved in doing anything, especially to do it at a high level or be really good at it. I think we forget that because people that are really good at it looks easy. And it does because you're seeing the finished product, you're seeing them in certain circumstances, right? So it makes it look easy, but you don't see all the work, you don't see all the years they spent doing stuff or, grinding away, just doing like failing at different things. And I think we have this really bizarre, messed up perception of what it means to be successful and what's important in life. And I think, the other thing too is like also that, like you said, that selfish desire, just wanting people to like us too, and like
Mm-hmm.
wanting to be popular gets in the way as well.
Yeah, yeah. Gary Vaynerchuk has a great video about this idea that like things come easy. He talks about how people are always criticizing him, and he loves it. He says how like people are always saying that the only reason I'm famous is because my dad had a wine shop. That. And as he's saying that, it just goes through like 800 episodes of his wine library TV that he made. Like nobody's willing to put in that effort. They all just want to
Yeah.
criticize and say, "Oh, it was given to him." And like, sure, some people, like 1% of people, not even, but they get stuff given to them. Sure, that's outside of your control. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Nothing. All you can ever
Yeah.
do is all you can do.
Well, that's the other thing too. I think that the Stoics, again, a lot of philosophers, I think, also are very adamant, which is like that whole notion of comparing ourselves to others and worrying about what other people have is like it's just a definite road to being miserable and negative. Like, there's no way around it. And dude, I see it's so funny. Like, there's so many things too nowadays because with the way we're connected, with our ability to access things, it's so easy. I mean, you can look up anybody's name and net worth. You can look up, whatever, right? And just get jealous and angry. But the reality is like that's just a crappy comparison to make because it's not that's not your life, right? Your life is your life. So start with what you have and work from there and make it the best you can. And like we talked about this before, when you compare only to yourself, you see that growth, you see those changes, and it feels good because you're not worried about what other people have. You're not worried about the outside world. And I think that's the biggest thing too.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great point of not comparing yourself to other people because almost every time that I've ever compared myself to other people, number one, it's been to people who have more than me in that category or better than me
Yeah.
in that category. Very rarely is it to people who have less or worse. So like
It's like
it's
never.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
never.
it's always like I'm at lack when I make that comparison, but also like I'd never feel better afterwards. So learning
No.
to see that crucially important, and then just I don't know. It's such like it's such a lost type of thing. But with the comparisons, thinking that it's a competitive world. So like thinking
Yeah.
that because
Yeah.
they have that much more, there's that much left for me, which not true. So, but like that'll get you lost because you're like, oh, they're successful, so that means it's going to be harder for me. There's going to be less for me, and it's just like there's an infinite amount to go around. So just
That's that
chill.
stupid, yeah. No, but that's that stupid mentality of like, I that's a very like that individualistic society mentality of everybody's fighting against everybody else, which makes no sense, one. And two, yeah, like you said, like it makes people feel like they can't do things because somebody else already has. Well, that's totally not the case. You can do lots of, you know,
Anything
I
one
keep seeing
person can
new
do,
people.
another person can do too. Yeah.
Every time I go to the grocery store, I feel like I see a new kind of coffee roaster out. It's like they seem to all be making it just fine in a field where there's giants like Starbucks. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
apparently it's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
And
funny.
yeah. But another thing that I like about Stoicism for like mental toughness and overcoming obstacles, and this is it. So like everybody thinks that there's some solution that's going to make it comfortable. Like we're not comfortable right now. We're feeling pain, we're suffering, whatever it is, and we think there's some solution that's going to make it better. But like the one thing that I really like about Stoicism is the idea that like sometimes suffering is part of it. Like that's just
Yeah.
it. You just have to sit there and bear it. And it's never comfortable. It's never what you want to do, but like the willingness to recognize that that's part of the process and to just be like, okay, this is what it is right now. Let me just sit and bear this. And eventually it breaks over you. Like there's never been a situation in your life that you haven't gotten through it. But it's just part of the process and learning to recognize that you need to go through that part of the process.
No, I think that it goes well too with like their whole idea of like what you have control over, of the importance of like persevering and endurance. And I think that to your point that the more you realize that and practice it, the better you do get at dealing with those situations and the less they affect you. So there is a point at which I think that like the discomfort affects you less because you've built up that willpower, that strength of will to just persevere through it, right? And so it gets easier and easier to do. So I think there is something to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just I like too that they one thing that I really like about Stoicism too is like they are very clear that this is just something that takes time to and effort and practice. And I mean, Marcus Aurelius is like one of my favorite examples of that because you see him go back to the same problems all the time, but it's like that's human life. And all the expectations we have for the quick fix or the immediate change, the immediate turnaround, like that is just a bad thing, I think, to focus on because it just makes us miserable again, too. It's these things that can't happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you really just want a quick fix rather than actually putting in effort. But when you really put in the effort, I think most people, at least, I think once they put in the effort to really do it, they feel way better because they realize they're actually able to do it. They don't need a quick fix. They
Mm-hmm.
can get through it on their own, and deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And remembering that you're gonna die. Like Marcus Aurelius literally
Yeah.
talks about that
Yeah.
nonstop. He's like, we're gonna die. We're gonna die. We're all dead. So like it's nonstop.
He was also like front lines, like in like military battles.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, the past
Probably
was like
helped.
gruesome in terms of violence.
Yeah.
So like that's
Yeah.
something we're definitely not experienced with nowadays. But just remembering that we're going to die because it's part and like a lot of times when we're feeling bad, we're like, yeah, but I don't want to live. And it's like, well, not wanting to live through pain at the moment is a lot different from wanting to die. So like it's okay to feel that. Totally cool. But like
Yeah.
reminding yourself that there's going to be a day where you're not living anymore. You're here for a brief period of time, whether that's, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, whatever it is, brief period of time over the history of the universe. And you get to experience this for just a short period of time. And right now it sucks. That's what it is. But you can just get through this suckage because there's cycles. No matter what,
Yeah.
I think comparing yourself with yourself, like you were talking about, is super important because that's one thing that I found definitely helpful recently when I felt down. Is when I felt down, I've looked at my life previous times when I felt down, and I look at them and I'm like, you know what? After every one of those, there was always an upswing. And what are the
Yeah.
chances that this time's going to be different?
Yeah. Right. That's a good one. I like that too. It is helpful too. And also it kind of reminds you too of like times when it was even harder and you still got through it, right? That you can get through it again, you'll get through it again. And it's like it's just in the moment, it's always so difficult. That's really the challenge, right? I think,
Mm-hmm.
it's so funny though, it really is. Remember we're gonna die is important too, because that's so helpful too to like also keep us from like letting ourselves hold ourselves back, being afraid of things. It's like when you remember you don't have that much time, like you can also it kind of helps motivate you to just start now so you don't regret it later, right? So you're not mad at yourself. So you did the things you wanted to do, and I think that's a way better, it's interesting too, because we're like our worst enemy, and all of us want is to like make the most we can of the time we have. It's
Mm-hmm.
really funny.
Yeah, I like thinking about death for two reasons. So like one on one side of it, I'm like, okay, I'm a dead man walking. Like I'm already dead. So like, what have I got to lose? That's the one
Yeah.
side I like of it. But the other side is something that he mentions a bit more explicitly. He says like, take a look at the things in your life that you like, and look at the best things among those, like the things that you like the most. And imagine if you didn't have those in your life, how much pain and suffering that would cost, how much work you would have to go in order to get that. And that, like, with the death part, I think about that as well. Cause like I look at the relationships in my life that I've developed, and like some of those are phenomenal. And I look at them and I'm super grateful for them. And I'm like, wow, that's like incredible. And even like some of the possessions that I may have, or some of the opportunities that I have, I'm like, that so easily, right before I started thinking about that, I was taking them for granted. But it like gives me that
Yeah.
thing that, oh my goodness, this is actually something really important. And if it wasn't here, I would be working so hard to get that. Like, let's just stop for a moment and be grateful that it's here now.
I think that's what people like. Philosophy gets a bad rap because I think what it does give us is it gives us perspective and it teaches us, well, there's a lot of practical tools also built into it, but it also teaches just how to think about things differently also in a way I think that's very helpful, like when you are struggling, because it gives you a chance to like kind of just stop yourself, regroup, look at the situation a little clearer, and kind of assess it differently. Because most of the time it's not as bad as we think either. That's the other problem. But it's like if you let that imagination and your emotions dictate it, it'll just keep getting worse. The world just keeps looking darker and darker and more dire and dangerous. But once you kind of regroup and see it clearly, you're like, oh yeah, wait, it's not like that. That's me changing it that way. It's like it's funny, but it's true. Like it's like if I listen to the news every day, I start to see the world in a way more negative light than if I just don't listen to it at all. And it's yes, it's like it is what it is, but like I think because part of that is because they're trying to get you to stay tuned in, and part of the way they do that is to get your emotions riled up, which makes you mad and angry and makes you see the world like more negatively. I think that's all there is to it. It's
Mm-hmm.
and once you realize that you don't have to engage with it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how poorly equipped we are for the modern world. Like humans or their equivalents have been around for 10,000 or 100,000 years, something like that. And so like that's a large amount of time. But like this whole information overload is really only the past 100 years. And so like,
Dude, really, like the past 22, when you look at like internet, cell phones, and that stuff, which has made it like exponentially like more crazy. You
yeah,
know?
so like thinking that we have the capability to handle that is kind of unreasonable. And so just distancing ourselves from it, or even just thinking like, okay, 100 years ago, would I have had to deal with this? Like everybody's like, you need to stay up to date on current affairs. Like you need to know what's going
Yeah.
on in the world. And I'm like, okay, fine. 100 years ago, what would I have need to know? I'll be like, I could pick up a newspaper once a month and be pretty good. That's it.
Yeah. That's pretty much it. And like, and because more often than not, especially back then, right, what you needed to know is what was directly in your community around you. And that's still pretty much true today. That's
Hmm.
the most important stuff you need to know is what's happening that directly affects you. Because that's going to impact you the most, and that's going to like also change your quality of life the most.
Not to mention, also look at what you're missing out on. So, like, think back 100 plus years ago, people were very in tune with nature. Like, they knew the changing of the seasons. They could tell when a storm was going to happen. Like, they knew all types of things that now we're completely oblivious to because we live inside of boxes, inside of other boxes, inside of other boxes,
Yeah.
like, completely distant from nature. So, like, recognizing how you can reconnect with that, because I think, we forget that we're a part of nature
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, no, we do, dude, all the time. It's like, because, you can go through your whole day without ever stepping foot in like anything natural. It's amazing. And
Hmm.
at the same time, it can be real. I think it is. It's probably harmful for us because we are animals. Like, we should get some sun. We should go out in the world. I
Hmm.
think that's true. It's a good point.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
anything else you want to touch on stoicism and, everything else?
I would just say, too, like, if you have the opportunity and you ever look at the Stoics or read their stuff and just remember, like, it takes work and it's something, it's human life. We should like don't make it more than it is, but also recognize that like you have the power to make your life what you want. You just have to make those choices. And it's
Hmm.
really about being proactive and active in your life and intentional and not looking at yourself as a victim or as somebody that things just happen to. Realize that you do have control over your person and stuff and start acting like it.
Yeah. That's a great point. That like sphere of influence or control. And then what I would just add is like, so like a lot of people nowadays, Stoicism is very popular. It's like a, and so
Yeah.
we're looking at, there are a lot of great modern Stoics, like people who are interpreting the Stoics of
Yeah.
bygone ages. But also, I would just say, like, listen to the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius on YouTube. It's a free audiobook. You listen to it double speed, takes like 2 hours to do. So, like, while you're driving, you could just listen to it and just like recognize the wisdom of 2000 years ago, how applicable it is today, and realize that he was struggling with the same problems. Like, I think that's one of the best ways to actually learn Stoicism is just kind of expose yourself to it
Yeah.
because I know for me personally, there was such a big hurdle to reading philosophy. Like, even though I minored in philosophy, there was such a big hurdle to it because these were difficult books. And it was just like it was,
Yeah.
but nowadays it's a lot easier because I don't need to sit down with a difficult book that's like I need to think about and everything. I can just put it on in the background while I'm doing something else. And eventually it gets downloaded.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. And and whether you do, whether you listen to it or whether you read it, I think you're right. Like one of the things I love about philosophy is like you get to see that like we have been struggling with the same problems in our lives. And you get to read or listen to like works by people who spent their whole lives thinking about it and thinking of like these problems in different ways, from different perspectives, how to maybe overcome them, what you can do to deal with it, like what really matters. I mean, they really do address like they might not answer the questions in a way that's perfect for you, but it gets you started. And once you're started on that path, I think you can't help but think more about it, and it just makes it better because it gives you more resources to use to like deal with the world around you, you know?
Mm-hmm. And yet we're still struggling with it because when that knowledge that we have is necessary, we're emotionally
It's gone.
like gone.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, we really are like emotional animals that occasionally are rational. It is really
Absolutely.
funny. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's crazy.
Absolutely.
It's like I constantly wonder whether there's going to be a point when like you get past it completely. I don't think there is.
I don't think we will, not in our
Yeah.
lifetimes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just like learning to flow with that because clearly, like if
Yeah.
we're designed that way, it was intentional. So like we're supposed to be this way where we're emotional. And eh,
Well, I think yeah, it's probably true. You're probably right that we probably lose, you can't be all one or all the other because you lose too much of something. So it's got to
mhm,
be a mixed bag, and you got to use them against each other to navigate them.
mhm. Yeah, well, you hear all
Yeah.
those like psychology things about the people who get a bullet through their brain and live, or like the people who their amygdala was just like dissolved because they had some weird fat dissolving issue, and like the crazy stuff that they do because they're lacking emotions like fear or these
Oh
different
yeah,
things.
yeah.
And like we really, everything that we have is necessary, but it's also learning to recognize the environment that we're in and how that influences it as well, and what we can do to make the best of it.
And live our best lives. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which I think that's it. Yeah.
Cool. So, in a
Yeah.
nutshell, there you have Stoicism for mental toughness, overcoming difficulties, living the best life, living the good life.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
Existential Stoic podcast. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, also podcasting services. We come at you twice a week with just tons of fun
Woo.
information. And it's
It
good
is
for
fun.
both of us because,
Yeah.
we struggle through the same problems over and over and over again. And it's comical how often it happens. But
Yeah. If you
anyway,
listen, you'll find out how many times.
I know, literally every week. A catastrophe every week. But yeah, this is the Existential Stoic podcast. Thank you for listening. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.